The Sumerians were an ancient civilization that emerged in southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, around 4000 BCE. They are credited with inventing the first writing system, cuneiform, as well as many other achievements in art, literature, mathematics, astronomy, and law. The Sumerians believed in a pantheon of gods and goddesses who ruled over various aspects of nature and human affairs. The Anunnaki were a group of deities in Sumerian mythology, who were said to be the offspring of An, the god of heaven, and Ki, the goddess of earth. The Anunnaki were associated with various functions, such as fertility, justice, war, and kingship. Some of the most prominent Anunnaki were Enki, the god of wisdom and water, Enlil, the god of wind and storms, Inanna, the goddess of love and war, and Marduk, the patron god of Babylon. There are many theories and speculations about the origin and nature of the Anunnaki. Some scholars suggest that they were based on historical rulers or priests who were deified by the Sumerians. Others propose that they were extraterrestrial beings who visited Earth in ancient times and influenced human civilization. The Anunnaki are a group of ancient Mesopotamian deities who were worshipped by the Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. They are said to be the offspring of An, the god of the sky, and Ki, the goddess of the earth. Some of the most prominent Anunnaki are Enlil, the god of air and chief of the pantheon, Enki, the god of water and wisdom, Ninkorsog, the mother goddess, Sin, Nanna, the god of the moon, Shamash, Utu, the god of the sun, and Ishtar, Inanna, the goddess of love and war. The Anunnaki had various roles and functions in Mesopotamian mythology. In some texts, they are described as the creators and rulers of humanity, who decreed their fates and destinies. In other texts, they are associated with the underworld, where they acted as judges of the dead. They were also involved in cosmic conflicts and battles, such as the one between Marduk and Tiamat in the Babylonian creation Epic of Gilgamesh. The Anunnaki were not worshipped as a collective group, but rather as individual gods with their own cults and temples. They were depicted as anthropomorphic beings with horns, crowns, and splendid attire. They were believed to possess extraordinary powers and to live in heaven or in subterranean realms. The Anunnaki have fascinated scholars and enthusiasts for centuries, as they represent one of the oldest and most influential pantheons in human history. Their myths and legends have inspired many works of art, literature, and popular culture. The Sumerians and the Anunnaki are two fascinating topics in ancient Mesopotamian history and mythology. The Sumerians were one of the earliest civilizations in the world, who lived in the region of southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, from about 4500 to 1750 BCE. They are credited with many inventions and achievements, such as writing, mathematics, astronomy, law, and agriculture. The Anunnaki were a class of gods in the Sumerian pantheon, who were believed to be the descendants of An, the god of heaven, and Ki, the goddess of earth. The name Anunnaki means princely seed or princely offspring in Sumerian. The Anunnaki had various roles and functions in Sumerian mythology, such as decreeing the fates of humans, judging the dead, and creating and destroying civilizations. Some people have speculated that the Anunnaki were not just mythical beings, but actually ancient aliens who visited Earth, and influenced human history. This idea was popularized by a Russian-born author named Zecharia Sitchin, who claimed that he had deciphered some of the Sumerian texts and found evidence of extraterrestrial intervention. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki came from a planet called Nibiru, which orbits the Sun every 3,600 years. He also claimed that the Anunnaki created humans by genetically modifying primitive hominids to serve as their slaves. However, most scholars and experts have rejected Sitchin's theories as pseudoscience and pseudo-history. They argue that his interpretations of the Sumerian texts are inaccurate, inconsistent, and unsupported by any archaeological or scientific evidence. They also point out that there is no mention of Nibiru, or any other planet beyond Pluto in any of the ancient Mesopotamian sources. The Sumerian creation myth is one of the oldest stories that describe how the world and humanity came to be. It is also known as the Eridu Genesis, because it was found on a clay tablet in the ancient city of Eridu, which was considered the first city by the Sumerians. The tablet is written in the Sumerian language and dates back to around 1600 BCE, but the story may be much older. According to the myth, in the beginning, there was only water, and the gods lived in heaven. The gods Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag created the Sumerians and made them live in a paradise on earth, where they had everything they needed. The gods also created animals and plants and gave them names. The gods then decided to establish kingship on earth and chose 5 cities to be ruled by divine kings. These cities were Eridu, Bat Tibera, Larak, Sippar, and Shuruppak. However, after some time, the humans became too noisy and disturbed the gods' sleep. The gods were angry, and decided to destroy them with a great flood. Enki, the god of water and wisdom, felt sorry for the humans and warned one of them, Ziusudra, who was the king and priest of Shuruppak. Enki told Ziusudra to build a large boat and save his family and some animals and plants. Ziusudra obeyed Enki and built a boat. The flood came and lasted for 7 days and nights. The boat floated on the water until the sun god Utu appeared and Ziusudra opened a window. He then sacrificed an ox and a sheep to thank the gods for saving him. The gods and Enlil saw Ziusudra and his boat, and were impressed by his piety. They granted him eternal life and made him live in a land called Dilmun, where the sun rises. The gods also promised never to send another flood to wipe out humanity again. The Sumerian creation myth is very similar to other flood stories that appear in later Mesopotamian texts, such as the Atrahasis Epic and the Epic of Gilgamesh, as well as in the Bible, where Noah plays the role of Ziusudra. The myth reflects the Sumerians' view of their origins, their relationship with the gods, and their fear of natural disasters. It also shows their appreciation for their culture, civilization, and kingship. Ziusudra, in Mesopotamian religion, rough counterpart to the biblical Noah, a survivor of a God-sent flood. When the gods had decided to destroy humanity with a flood, the god Enki, Akkadian Ea, who did not agree with the decree, revealed it to Ziusudra, a man well known for his humility and obedience. Ziusudra did as Enki commanded him and built a huge boat, in which he successfully rode out the flood. Afterward, he prostrated himself before the gods Anu, and Enlil, Bel, and, as a reward for living a godly life, Ziusudra was given immortality. Flood myth. Flood myth, also called Deluge myth, any of numerous mythologies in which a flood destroys a typically disobedient original population. Myths of a great flood, the deluge, are widespread over Eurasia and America. The flood, with a few exceptions, is an expiation by the water, after which a new type of world is created. Biblical flood myth. The biblical account of the deluge, Genesis 6:11-9:19, features Noah as the hero of the flood story. In his account, Noah is represented as the patriarch who, because of his blameless piety, was chosen by God to perpetuate the human race after his wicked contemporaries had perished in the flood. A righteous man, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, Genesis 6:8. Thus, when God beheld the corruption of the earth and determined to destroy it, he gave Noah divine warning of the impending disaster and made a covenant with him, promising to save him and his family. Noah was instructed to build an ark, and in accordance with God's instructions he took into the ark male and female specimens of all the world's species of animals, from which the stocks might be replenished. Consequently, according to this narrative, the entire surviving human race descended from Noah's 3 sons and their wives. The religious meaning of the flood is conveyed after Noah's heroic survival, having safely landed on Mount Ararat. He then built an altar on which he offered burnt sacrifices to God, who then bound himself to a pact never again to curse the earth on humanity's account. God then set a rainbow in the sky as a visible guarantee of his promise in this covenant. God also renewed his commands given at creation, but with two changes: humankind could now kill animals and eat meat, and murder would be punished by humans. Despite the tangible similarities of the Mesopotamian mythologies and the biblical flood, the biblical story has a unique Hebraic perspective. In the Babylonian stories, the destruction of the flood was the result of a disagreement among the gods, while in Genesis it resulted from the moral corruption of human history. The primitive polytheism of the Mesopotamian versions is transformed in the biblical story into an affirmation of the omnipotence and benevolence of the one righteous God. Mesopotamian flood myths. According to Genesis, an ancient Sumerian religious epic, deities fashioned humankind from clay to cultivate the ground, care for flocks, and perpetuate the worship of the gods. Cities were soon built, but, for some reason, the gods determined to destroy humankind with a flood. Enki Akkadian, Ea, who did not agree with the decree, revealed it to Ziusudra, a man well known for his humility and obedience. Ziusudra did as Enki commanded him and built a huge boat, in which he successfully rode out the flood. Afterward, he prostrated himself before the gods Anu, and Enlil, and, as a reward for living a godly life, Ziusudra was given immortality. In the related Babylonian Gilgamesh epic, Utnapishtim and his wife are the survivors of the mythological flood, having preserved human and animal life in the great boat he built. The couple were then deified by the god Enlil as a reward for heeding the divine instruction to build an ark. Another Mesopotamian myth is the story of Atrahasis, a wise man who was saved from the flood after being warned by one of the gods to build a ship to save himself. This story is preserved in fragmentary Old Babylonian and Assyrian versions. These Babylonian mythologies have close affinities with the biblical story of the flood and are the source of such features as the building and provisioning of the ark, its flotation, and the dispatch of the raven and dove, as well as the part played by the human protagonist in the biblical account. Other flood myths. In Greek legend, Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, the creator of humankind, is the equivalent of Noah. When Zeus, the king of the gods, resolved to destroy all humanity by a flood, Deucalion constructed an ark in which, according to one version, he and his wife rode out the flood and landed on Mount Parnassus. According to Indian flood mythology, the man Manu was the sole survivor of the Great Flood, combining the characteristics of the Hebrew Bible figures of Noah and Adam, the first man. The Shatapatha Brahmana recounts how Manu was warned by a fish, to whom he had done a kindness, that a flood would destroy the whole of humanity. He therefore built a boat, as the fish advised. When the flood came, he tied this boat to the fish's horn and was safely steered to a resting place on a mountaintop. When the flood receded, Manu, the sole human survivor, performed a sacrifice, pouring oblations of butter and sour milk into the waters. After a year, there was born from the waters a woman who announced herself as the daughter of Manu. These two then became the ancestors of a new human race to replenish the earth. In the Mahabharata, great epic of the Bharata dynasty, the fish is identified with the god Brahma, while in the Puranas, ancient lore, it is Matsya, the fish incarnation of Lord Vishnu. The Aztec believed that 4 worlds had existed before the present universe. Those worlds, or suns, had been destroyed by catastrophes, and humankind had been entirely wiped out at the end of each sun. The 4th sun, Naui-Atl, for water, ended in a gigantic flood that lasted 52 years. Only 1 man and 1 woman survived, sheltered in a huge cypress, but they were later turned to dogs. Noah. Noah, also spelled No, the hero of the biblical flood story in the Old Testament book of Genesis, the originator of vineyard cultivation, and, as the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the representative head of a Semitic genealogical line. A synthesis of at least 3 biblical source traditions, Noah is the image of the righteous man made party to a covenant with Yahweh, the God of Israel, in which nature's future protection against catastrophe is assured. Noah appears in Genesis 5:29 as the son of Lamech and 9th in descent from Adam. In the story of the deluge, Genesis 6:11-9:19, he is represented as the patriarch who, because of his blameless piety, was chosen by God to perpetuate the human race after his wicked contemporaries had perished in the flood. A righteous man, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, Genesis 6:8. Thus, when God beheld the corruption of the earth and determined to destroy it, he gave Noah divine warning of the impending disaster and made a covenant with him, promising to save him and his family. Noah was instructed to build an ark, and in accordance with God's instructions he took into the ark male and female specimens of all the world's species of animals, from which the stocks might be replenished. Consequently, according to this narrative, the entire surviving human race descended from Noah's 3 sons. Such a genealogy sets a universal frame within which the subsequent role of Abraham, as the father of Israel's faith, could assume its proper dimensions. The story of the flood has close affinities with Babylonian traditions of apocalyptic floods in which Utnapishtim plays the part corresponding to that of Noah. These mythologies are the source of such features of the biblical flood story as the building and provisioning of the ark, its flotation, and the subsidence of the waters, as well as the part played by the human protagonist. Tablet 11 of the Gilgamesh epic introduces Utnapishtim, who, like Noah, survived cosmic destruction by heeding divine instruction to build an ark. The Epic of Gilgamesh is an epic poem from ancient Mesopotamia. The literary history of Gilgamesh begins with 5 Sumerian poems about Bilgamesh, Sumerian for Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, dating from the 3rd dynasty of Ur circa 2100 BC. These independent stories were later used as source material for a combined epic in Akkadian. The first surviving version of this combined epic, known as the Old Babylonian version, dates back to the 18th century BC and is titled after its incipit, Shutter Eli Sheri, surpassing all other kings. Only a few tablets of it have survived. The later Standard Babylonian version compiled by Sinliki-Unnini dates from the 13th to the 10th centuries BC and bears the incipit Shah Nokwe Muru, he who saw the abyss, lit. He who sees the unknown. Approximately 2/3 of this longer, 12-tablet version have been found. Some of the best copies were discovered in the library ruins of the 7th century BC Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. The first half of the poem discusses Gilgamesh, who was king of Uruk, and Enkidu, a wild man created by the gods to stop Gilgamesh from oppressing the people of Uruk. After Enkidu becomes civilized through sexual initiation with Shamat, he travels to Uruk, where he challenges Gilgamesh to a test of strength. Gilgamesh wins the contest. Nonetheless, the two become friends. Together, they make a 6-day journey to the legendary cedar forest, where they plan to slay the guardian, Humbaba the Terrible, and cut down the sacred cedar tree. The goddess Ishtar sends the bull of heaven to punish Gilgamesh for spurning her advances. Gilgamesh and Enkidu kill the bull of heaven, after which the gods decide to sentence Enkidu to death and kill him. In the second half of the epic, distress over Enkidu's death causes Gilgamesh to undertake a long and perilous journey to discover the secret of eternal life. He eventually learns that life, which you look for, you will never find. For when the gods created man, they let death be his share, and life withheld in their own hands. Nevertheless, because of his great building projects, his account of Sadari's advice, and what the immortal man Utnapishtim told him about the Great Flood, Gilgamesh's fame survived well after his death, with expanding interest in his story. It has been translated into many languages and is featured in several works of popular fiction. The epic is regarded as a foundational work in religion and the tradition of heroic sagas, with Gilgamesh forming the prototype for later heroes like Heracles, Hercules, and the epic itself serving as an influence for Homeric epics among others.